Ha-eun always believed Min-jae barely tolerated her, the quiet officer who watched everything but never let her get close. But when a sandstorm tore their convoy apart and trapped them alone in the desert, the man she thought disliked her became the only one determined to keep her alive. Before we begin the story, leave a comment telling us what city you're watching from. And at the end, don't forget to rate the story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. The desert wind carried dust across the triage center, lifting thin clouds of sand that clung to clothes, hair, and exhausted faces. Morning had barely begun, yet the refugee camp was already buzzing with movement, long lines forming in front of medical tents. Metal poles rattling, voices calling for help in every direction. Ha-eun moved swiftly between the injured, her ponytail swaying with each urgent step. Her hands were steady, but her warm brown eyes revealed the exhaustion she tried to hide. She carried more weight on her shoulders than anyone realized, yet she managed soft reassurances for every person she passed. Everyone except him. A few meters away, Min-jae walked with firm, precise steps, posture straight, almost military. The security patch on his arm was worn from sun and sand, yet he carried himself like the only unmoving structure in the middle of chaos. He spoke little. When he did, his voice was clipped and controlled. Keep the line organized. Move the families to the shaded area. No one enters the north sector without clearance. People obeyed. They always did. Some found him intimidating. Others simply misunderstood him. Ha-eun tried not to think about him at all. Or so she told herself. She examined a child's bandaged arm. She caught Min-jae looking in her direction. Just a second, maybe less, before he turned away quickly, face unreadable. She muttered through her teeth. He probably thinks I'm doing it wrong. Later. As she headed toward the supply station, shaking dust from her uniform, she found Min-jae there, scanning the perimeter with stiff intensity. I need more saline, she said, not meeting his eyes. He handed her a pack without speaking. Their fingers brushed a brief, accidental touch. Ha-eun pulled back instantly, heart pounding for reasons she didn't want to consider. Thanks, she said, clipped, already turning away. Min-jae's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly before he refocused on the trucks. Their tension was constant, quiet, sharp, and oddly magnetic. A stretched wire humming every time their paths crossed. She thought he made everything harder with his endless rules. He thought she risked too much for anyone who needed help. Later that afternoon, while the convoy prepared to depart, Ha-eun hurried toward the trucks. Min-jae stepped in front of her with his usual seriousness. You can't enter this zone without a helmet, he said. I'm just delivering a list, Min-jae. Rules apply even for lists. She rolled her eyes. You really enjoy complicating everything, don't you? And you enjoy ignoring protocols, he replied. There was no real anger between them, only something restrained, heavy, unspoken. As she walked past, she felt his gaze linger on her for half a second. Not cold, not judgmental, almost worried. But she didn't notice. Not yet. Soon, the desert would shift beneath them, and the distance they guarded so fiercely would begin to crumble. The convoy crawled across the desert like a thin line of metal dots shimmering under the ruthless sun. Heat rose from the cracked ground in distorted waves, making the air heavy and difficult to breathe. Dust swirled around the tires, creating a permanent haze that followed every vehicle. Inside one of the trucks, Ha-eun tried to organize medical records, while the vehicle jolted over the uneven terrain. Sweat slid down her neck, trapped beneath the scarf she wore to protect her skin from the sun. Her fingers trembled slightly, but she ignored it. She always ignored it. Beside her, Min-jae stayed focused on the landscape with a precision that felt almost instinctive. A map lay open across his lap. The radio was gripped firmly in his hand. His eyes scanned the horizon without pause. He murmured numbers, directions, and coordinates under his breath, constantly recalculating. Every few minutes he gave clipped instructions through the radio. Truck 3, keep your distance. 4, adjust northeast. All units, watch the wind. It's shifting. Ha-eun pretended not to notice him, but she saw everything. The way he checked the sky every minute, the way his brow tightened when the wind changed. The way his hand clenched the radio whenever something felt wrong, and Min-jae noticed things too. The way her blinks grew slower, as if her vision blurred, the pale tone settling over her skin. The trembles she tried to hide as she held the clipboard tighter. "Did you drink water?" he asked, without turning his head. "I'm fine," Ha-eun replied too quickly. Min-jae didn't believe her. He never did when she said that. He opened a bottle and handed it to her, firm but gentle. She hesitated, then took it, trying to pretend she wasn't desperate for it. The silence between them lasted only seconds. A low, heavy crack echoed through the desert, the kind that made the ground vibrate. Min-jae's head snapped up instantly. The sky, once a dull blue, now shifted into a thick orange haze swallowing the horizon. "No, not this fast," he muttered, already lifting the radio. "Sandstorm approaching. Direct path." Ha-eun turned to the window. The desert was disappearing behind a monstrous wall of swirling dust. "All vehicles," Min-jae commanded, voice sharp. "Seal vents, lock windows, reduce speed." Now, the driver tried to maintain the convoy's formation, but the wind slammed into the truck's side, shaking the entire structure violently. Visibility vanished. The world turned into a churning orange blur. "I can't see anything," the driver shouted. Min-jae leaned forward. "Shift right. Stay aligned with the terrain markers." Or will he didn't finish. The wind surged again, harder than before. The front wheels slid over a layer of loose sand covering a deep crack in the ground. Ha-eun gasped as the truck lurched violently to the side. "Hold on," Min-jae shouted, grabbing the dashboard with one hand and reaching for Ha-eun with the other. The driver fought for control, but gravity won. The truck skidded off the marked path, sliding down a short, steep slope. It slammed onto a lower basin of dry, broken earth with a loud impact. The cabin rattled. Dust burst through unseen seams. The radio screeched with static before going silent. The storm roared around them like a living thing. Above them, somewhere in the blinding chaos, the rest of the convoy kept moving. Without realizing, one truck had disappeared completely. Ha-eun tried to breathe through the choking dust, her heartbeat a frantic drum. Min-jae scanned the surroundings quickly, assessing damage, escape routes, and checking if everyone was conscious. Then his eyes met hers. And in his stare, she saw it clearly. Alertness, determination, something deeper, something meant only for her. The desert had swallowed them whole, and no one knew where they were. Inside the fallen truck, the air was thick with dust, so fine it felt like it crawled into their lungs. The engine had died after the impact, and the radio crackled with weak, broken static, unable to reach anyone through the storm outside. Ha-eun tried to stand, but the truck's tilted floor made everything slide. Boxes and equipment rolled back and forth with every gust of wind. One of them, large and heavy, slipped from an upper shelf and came crashing toward her Ha-eun. Min-jae lunged without hesitation, pulling her out of the way just before the crate slammed onto the metal floor where she had been. She collided against his chest, dust rising around them like smoke. "Are you hurt?" he asked, voice deeper than usual. I think I'm fine." But when she tried to step back, pain shot through her ankle and upper knee. She gasped, soft but sharp enough for Min-jae to catch. His expression tightened instantly. "You're injured. It's nothing. I can walk." The truck tilted under another strong gust. Ha-eun stumbled again, and Min-jae caught her by the waist, his grip steady and warm. "Ha-eun," his voice was quiet but firm. "You're not fine." The radio finally fell silent. No voices, no convoy, no contact. Min-jae adjusted the frequency again, jaw tense, nothing but static. "They'll notice we're missing." "Shh," Ha-eun tried. "Not soon enough. Not while the storm is this strong." She swallowed hard. Inside the truck, it was suffocatingly hot. But outside, when the sun dropped, the desert would turn deadly cold. Cold enough to be dangerous for someone injured. Min-jae took a breath, made his choice. "We can't stay here. The temperature will nosedive at night." He pushed the door open with his shoulder. The wind fought him back, but he forced it wide enough for them to slip through. "Where are we even going?" Ha-eun asked, fear leaking into her voice. "There's an old watch post a few kilometers from here, abandoned but solid. It's our only option." When she tried to climb down alone, her injured leg buckled. Min-jae reached for her again, tension flashing across his face. "Lean on me, I can try," Ha-eun, soft but unarguable. She hesitated, then passed her arm around his neck. The contact was immediate, warm, steady, too close. Min-jae's hand wrapped around her waist as he helped her down the dune, supporting almost all her weight. Each step sank slightly in the sand. The wind whipped against them, dragging their clothes, their hair, their breath. "If the pain gets worse, tell me," he murmured. "Just keep going," she whispered. But he knew. He always knew. After a long, tense walk, a low concrete outline emerged from the sand, a tiny watchpost half buried by the desert, with a metal ladder leading to a small lookout tower. Min-jae forced the heavy door open. It groaned loudly, then gave way. Inside it was dark and cramped. Old supply crates, a dusty thermal blanket, a few scraps of abandoned rations, enough space for 2 people, barely. Ha-eun limped forward, and Min-jae closed the door behind them, shutting out the storm. Then his entire demeanor shifted. He moved with sharp purpose, checking structural cracks, scanning corners, clearing space, before finally kneeling in front of her. "Sit." But the voice wasn't stern. It was warm, almost careful. Ha-eun sat on the cold concrete. Min-jae examined her ankle, then her knee, touching gently, too gently for someone so rigid. His hands were precise, warm, steady against her skin. "Tell me if it hurts." "It already hurts," she whispered. He lifted his eyes to hers. For a moment, nothing else existed. Not the storm, not the darkness, not the desert swallowing them whole. Just the 2 of them, closer than they had ever dared to be. Something in him softened. Something in her cracked open. It was the first fracture in the wall they had built between them. Night fell over the desert like a curtain of ice. The temperature dropped so fast it felt unreal, as if the heat of the day had never existed. Outside, the wind howled across the dunes, a long, lonely sound that echoed through the thin concrete walls of the abandoned post. Inside the small shelter, Min-jae and Ha-eun sat on the floor, backs against the wall, sharing the single thermal blanket they had found. The space was so tight, their legs brushed, their shoulders touched, and their breaths warmed the cold air between them. The silence was heavy at first, heavy enough that both could hear the tremble in the other's breathing. Ha-eun finally spoke, her voice low. "Why are you always so serious, Min-jae? So distant?" He didn't answer right away. His gaze stayed fixed on the cracked floor, as if searching for the right words. "Because when I get close to people, I lose them," he said quietly. "I've lost too many already. Missions, accidents, choices I couldn't undo." Ha-eun's breath caught. She hadn't expected honesty. Not like this. Min-jae hesitated, then continued. "And you?" He swallowed hard. "I've seen you come back from those endless shifts, exhausted. I saw you one night behind the medical tent, crying alone. I wanted to walk to you. I wanted to say something, but I froze." Ha-eun's eyes widened, the memory hitting her with surprising force. "Why didn't you?" she whispered. "Because I was afraid," he said. "Afraid that if I started caring, I wouldn't know how to stop." The words hit her chest like a quiet earthquake. She looked down at her hands. "I spend my days taking care of everyone else," she admitted softly. "Sometimes I feel like I'm disappearing, like there's no one left to notice when I'm the one falling apart." Her voice trembled at the end, just slightly. Min-jae noticed. Of course he noticed. A shiver ran through her body. Not from the cold alone, something deeper, heavier. Min-jae shifted closer. "Come here," he murmured. She didn't resist. Her body moved almost on instinct, leaning into his chest. His arms came around her with a careful strength, pulling her tighter under the blanket. His warmth spread immediately, slow and steady, grounding her. Her head rested on him, and she felt his heartbeat strong, deliberate, as if each beat was choosing to stay. Min-jae slid one hand gently along her back, the other resting at her waist. Not hurried, not invasive, just a quiet promise that he was there. Ha-eun exhaled, breath brushing the base of his throat. It made him shiver. After a moment he spoke, voice rough. "I kept my distance from you because I felt too much." She lifted her head slightly, eyes searching his. "I thought you despised me," she confessed. "You always looked annoyed whenever I came near." He shook his head, forehead nearly touching hers. "I wasn't annoyed. I was trying to hide it." "Hide what?" she whispered. Min-jae leaned in slowly, as if afraid to break the moment. Their foreheads touched. Warm skin against cold night. Their breaths mixed, shallow, warm, trembling. The world shrank to the space between their mouths. "Ha-eun," he whispered. Her hand slid to his chest, fingers curling in the fabric of his shirt. "Don't hide anymore," she breathed. The first kiss happened like something inevitable, soft, slow, a careful press of warmth in the freezing dark. Then deeper, a kiss full of restraint and release, a quiet ache finally given shape. Min-jae's hand cupped the side of her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone, while Ha-eun held on to him as if she had been waiting for this without knowing it. When they finally pulled apart, their lips hovered close, breathing the same warm air. Ha-eun laid her head on his chest again. He wrapped both arms around her, drawing her into his body like protection was second nature. They stayed that way as the night deepened, sharing heat because they had to. But holding each other long after survival stopped being the reason. Dawn crept slowly over the desert, painting the sand with pale gold. The cold still lingered, but there was already a quiet promise of the brutal heat that would soon rise and swallow everything. Inside the abandoned outpost, Ha-eun woke first. She blinked, disoriented for a moment, until she felt it. The steady rhythm of a heartbeat beneath her ear, the firm weight of an arm around her waist, the soft rise and fall of a chest she had fallen asleep against. Min-jae. He was still holding her, even in sleep. His face, without the harsh lines of command, looked younger, softer, almost peaceful. Ha-eun watched him for a few quiet seconds, surprised by how natural it felt to be in his arms, as if her body had been waiting for a moment like this without telling her. Min-jae stirred. His eyes opened slowly, and the first thing he saw was her. "You're awake," he murmured, voice still heavy with sleep. "So are you," she whispered back. Neither moved, neither wanted to. After a long breath, Ha-eun drew back slightly, enough to see him clearly. "Min-jae, what happens when we go back?" she asked softly. "Are we just going to walk into the camp and pretend nothing happened?" He held her gaze, steady and unwavering. "I can't go back to being a stranger to you," he said. "Not after this. Not after holding you all night." Her heart tightened painfully and beautifully. But before she could answer, a distant sound broke the quiet. A low mechanical hum, faint but unmistakable. Ha-eun sat up straighter. "Engines?" Min-jae was already on his feet. He climbed the narrow ladder to the tower, emerging into the cold desert air. The sun was rising fast, turning sand dunes into molten gold. In the distance, dust trails, vehicles, life. He grabbed his shirt, torn and dusty, and waved it high above his head. He angled it toward the sun, catching whatever reflection he could. "Over here," shouted, his voice tearing across the empty space. Ha-eun watched from below, her pulse racing in relief, and something that felt a lot like fear. Fear of losing this. Fear of returning to the world where everything between them had been unspoken. When Min-jae climbed back down, he walked straight to her and took her hands in his. Warm, steady, intentional. "Ha-eun," he said quietly. "What we felt here, this wasn't just fear. It wasn't just the situation." She swallowed, eyes softening. "I know. When they find us," he continued, voice low. "I don't want this staying buried out here in the sand." Ha-eun stepped closer until their foreheads almost touched. "If you try to pretend nothing changed," she whispered, "I will chase you across the entire camp." Min-jae huffed a small, breathless laugh. "I believe you." The engines grew louder, closer. Moments later, a rescue team appeared on the ridge, advancing quickly with medical packs and radios. They spotted the outpost and waved. Min-jae squeezed Ha-eun's hands one last time before stepping forward to guide the rescuers. But even as they approached, the rescuers exchanged brief looks, subtle, knowing ones. The way Min-jae stood protectively beside her, the way Ha-eun unconsciously leaned toward him, the warmth in their eyes whenever they looked at each other. No one needed an explanation. It was obvious they were not just colleagues. They had survived the desert, found something deeper in the process. A few days later, the desert winds carried the familiar smell of dust across the refugee camp. The same tents flapped in the heat. The same long lines formed under the sun. The same voices called for help. But for Ha-eun, everything felt different. She limped slightly as she walked, her ankles still wrapped, but her steps were steady. Her chest felt lighter and heavier all at once. The camp was the same. She wasn't. From a distance, she spotted him. Min-jae stood near a cluster of security vehicles, issuing orders to his team. Sharp posture, firm voice, focused eyes. The same man she used to avoid looking at for too long. But now, she didn't look away. And when Min-jae finally noticed her, his expression changed instantly, the hard lines softening just for her. He excused himself from his team and walked toward her with that purposeful stride she knew so well. They met in a quieter spot, behind a supply tent where the wind whistled softly against the canvas. It was the first moment alone they'd had since the rescue team brought them back. Min-jae stopped in front of her, searching her eyes. "Ha-eun," he began, voice low. "I don't want to lose what started out there." Her breath hitched, not in fear this time, but recognition. "I don't want that either," she said. Her voice was softer than she expected, honest in a way she had always avoided with him. She took a small step closer. "I don't want to go back to being just the doctor you protect from a distance, Min-jae." His jaw tightened, not in frustration, but in emotion he couldn't quite mask. He moved closer, slowly, carefully, exactly like he had in the cold desert night, giving her every chance to pull away, even if he didn't want her to. When he reached her, he paused only a breath away. His eyes asked a question, hers answered before she spoke. Min-jae lifted a hand and brushed a strand of hair from her face, fingertips lightly grazing her cheek. Ha-eun leaned into the touch. And then, with no storm raging, no danger forcing them together, no darkness to hide behind, he kissed her. A real kiss. Warm, intentional, chosen. Ha-eun wrapped her arms around him, feeling the strength in him soften against her. Min-jae's hand slid to her waist, pulling her closer, as if anchoring himself in the only place that had felt right since the desert. When they finally parted, breath slow and warm, Ha-eun rested her forehead against his. "The desert was supposed to break us," she whispered. "It didn't," Min-jae replied. "It found us." Their fingers intertwined, not by accident, not by necessity, but by choice. Around them, the camp buzzed with the same chaos as always. But for them, it felt like the beginning of something entirely new, something stronger than missions, storms, or miles of sand. The desert, the place everyone feared, had become the only place brave enough to let them fall in love. So, did you enjoy today's story? If your heart raced at any moment, if you found yourself cheering for Ha-eun and Min-jae or imagining what you would do in a moment like that, tell me in the comments. Leave your rating from 0 to 10. I truly want to know what you thought. And if you enjoy stories filled with romance, survival, and slow-burning emotional tension, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next one. Thank you for watching until the end, and see you in the next story.